In the earlier briefing, when I was talking about code blocks, I said that there are types of code blocks. Am I right? And we stopped when the class code block arrived. Well, within the class, there are multiple code blocks that are executed in special ways, in special scopes. Let us see what those blocks of codes are so that we can understand the steps that the JVM takes to execute this object creation. Because when an object is created, all of these code blocks are being executed within the class. When the JVM loads the class in memory and when the JVM finds the new keyword with that object construction, the first thing it does is get the static code blocks. What are static code blocks? These are the code blocks that have a global scope. What is a global scope? Scope is basically a duration from when a code block is instantiated and till when this code block will be alive. This scope is basically the birthday and death day of a code block. Okay, now when I say global scope, this means this type of code blocks, which are static code blocks, will be created when the application starts, as soon as the application starts. This is the birthday of this particular static code block. Okay, now when does it die? This static code blocks only dies when the program stops running completely. Capiche? Okay, when the app stops. This is when the program is dead. Created, and when the application stops, this is destroyed. When I say created and destroyed, I mean purely in memory, not in front of you, not in the real world, purely in software memory, especially the JVM. Now, the second type of code blocks is instance code blocks. What are instance code blocks? Since the static code blocks have a global scope, the instance code blocks have instance scope. Well, you might ask that what do I mean by instance scope? To understand the instance scope, we have to understand what an instance is. This is just another term for an object. This is just another term for an object. Well, in the last statement that we created, where we created a Rolex watch, that was an object. That object is nothing but an instance. Just imagine now, you have a factory, you have a Rolls-Royce factory, you want a car to be manufactured, you have the class, which is the model, you give it to the manufacturing unit, that manufacturing unit manufactures the car. Well, does the manufacturing unit manufacture only one car or just two cars, just three, four, a specified number? No, right? It has to manufacture thousands of cars. Why? Because that is totally bound to where this car will be sold. This car will be sold in a country where you will be using maximum of Rolls-Royce cars, or you will be never using the Rolls-Royce cars. So an instance is basically a car which was created from that particular model. So that model can have multiple cars created. So in Java, we say that Rolls-Royce class can have multiple instances created, in the sense multiple objects created. So this scope, which is the instance scope, is basically is alive when the object is created. Okay, this is the birth or the creation time of this instance code blocks. When does it die? Well, when the object is destroyed. Simple. Now you might be asking a very important question. When will be the object created and when will it be destroyed? The answer to the first question is basically when we used the new keyword to create the object in the earlier statement. When it will be destroyed, an object is destroyed when it is no longer referenced in memory. When you have no access to that object, then JVM will clear that particular object from the memory. That is when the object is destroyed. And that is when this code block also will be detached from memory. Now, these are static and instance code blocks. Let us see more type of code blocks which are existing in a class. So, the third type of code block is a constructor. Well, this is the exact term which we used when we created an object, didn't we? This constructor is basically the last step before an object is created in memory by the JVM. So, after all the static blocks are executed and after all the instance blocks are executed, the JVM will then call the constructor of the class to create a new object. But you might be thinking, why do we have to go through the static and instance code blocks? Why can't we directly create a new object? Because we didn't want this, we just want to create a new object. Well, as I told you, there are special types of code blocks. The static and instance code blocks are having the special features to it. So the constructor will look like this. It will have a class name. In our example, it will be our Rolex watch. This will have the same structure or signature with the two open and closed curly braces. So everything that falls into this constructor will be executed in the very last after executing all of the static code blocks and all of the instance code blocks. Now just focus on this particular part. Now just focus on this particular part. This is the class name, but well, just notice this small brackets that are open and closed. This is exactly what we invoked when we created an object using the new keyword. So, what is actually this constructor? This is the final call which will tell JVM to create an object, an instance of this Rolex watch in memory. So whenever we created an object saying new object, then the JVM creates a Rolex watch in memory and it returns us the reference. This is basically what the constructor is in the very simplest overview. When all of these three steps are executed, the first step being the static code blocks executed, the second step being the instance code blocks being executed, and the last step, which is the constructor being executed. This is when we have our object created in memory. This is exactly what happens when JVM sees the new object creation line of execution.